In this video, we are going to expand upon our last one. In our last one, we defined what angles are, and we looked at the angle addition postulate. Here, we're going to look more specifically at what happens when we have particular types of angle pairs. So when we add them together, what kind of relationship occurs? Let's go ahead and dive into our first two, which are complementary and supplementary. Complementary angles are when we have two positive angles whose measure sum to equal 90 degrees. So let's look at two examples, an adjacent and a non-adjacent. So here, my first example is an adjacent, which means that the two angles share a side. And I can see that with this smaller one and this larger one together, they come to make this 90-degree symbol, which means that together they add up to 90 degrees, which makes them complementary. Here, this is a little small, but it says 30 degrees, and this one says 60. If I were to add these together, 30 plus 60 is 90, which also makes them complementary. When we have complementary angles, each angle is the complement of the other. All right, supplementary is very similar, but instead of adding up to 90, they add up to 180. All right, so I want to go ahead and highlight the differences here. So I'm going to make sure I put an emphasis on my 90 and my 180. So here it's 90, and then here it is 180. Let's go ahead and look at an example of these. All right, in our first example, we have a straight angle. All right, that is when we have the two angles that make up a straight line. And straight lines or straight angles always equal 180 degrees. Okay, so because we see this straight line here, that is what makes this the 180 degrees, or the supplementary relationship between our first and second angle. Here I have 65 and 115. If I add those together, I get 180. So even though they're not sharing a side like this one, they are still supplementary angles. All right, each angle is the supplement of the other. Each angle is a supplement of the other. I want to make sure that I take note of my key terms. So I have my complementary compared to my supplementary here. And again, I want to touch on the adjacent versus non-adjacent. So adjacent angles are going to share a vertex and a ray, whereas non-adjacent will not share one of those things. So they could connect at a point, but they're not going to have that shared ray. So if I'm looking at this angle and this angle, these are non-adjacent, whereas these two are, because they have a shared side and the shared vertex. Okay, so here we want to use our diagram that I'm going to draw. Okay, so we have this figure here, and we're going to use it to answer 4 questions. The first one prompts us to name a pair of complementary and supplementary angles. So we need to recall that complementary means our angles add up to 90 degrees. So we're going to look at these 3 numbers and see which 2 will sum up to 90. I can already see that this 131 is too big, so I'm going to ignore that. If I take 41 plus 49, that does add up to 90, which means that angle FGK and angle GKL. Okay, now I want to find 2 angles that add up to 180. If I take 131 and add it to 41, I'm going to get 172. That's not the 180 that I'm looking for supplementary. If I take 131 and add it to 49, that gives me 180. So I can say that angle HGK and angle GKL are supplementary. All right, this next question wants to know, are angles KGH and LKG supplementary? So I'm going to go ahead and trace those. I have KGH and LKG. Now I see that they do share this side right here, but they have to have a common vertex, and the vertex of one is up here and the vertex of the other is down here. So that means no, they do not. because they don't have a common vertex. Okay, we're going to look at two more angle types, and those are linear pairs and vertical angles. Two adjacent angles are a linear pair when their non-common sides are opposite rays. So if we have two angles, here's my first one, okay, and my second one, I'm going to draw in pink, is going to share this side here. Their non-common sides are opposite rays, meaning they extend in exactly opposite directions. We call this, they form a straight angle together. And they are supplementary. I want to point out that when we were talking about supplementary alone, we said that they could be adjacent or non-adjacent. However, now that we switch our conversation to linear pair, it specifies that these are indeed adjacent angles. Let's go ahead and look at our last type, and that is vertical angles. Okay, so vertical angles are going to have two pairs of sides that form opposite rays. So if I make my first angle here, I'll do it in yellow again. Okay, and then I make my second angle. They're going to be going in the exact opposite direction as the first. So I can see this pink and yellow side here make up a straight line as best as I can. Freehand, right? And same with my second pair. Okay, so if I were to highlight this, I could highlight it with just one straight line all the way across. Okay, there's one line, there's a second line, and that's what makes up two vertical angles. All right, let's look at an example of identifying angle pairs. Okay, so we're going to use this diagram right here to identify a pair of vertical angles and then a linear pair as well. So let's start with our vertical angles. Okay, so I'm looking for angles where I have two pairs of opposite rays, which means they're going to form a straight line. I see one straight line here, and I see a second straight line here. If I try to use this one, I'm going to have to bounce up or back to the right. That's not going to create that straight line effect that I need. So I can see if I look at the two angles created by these opposite rays, I have angle 1 and angle 5. Okay, now I want to find a pair, a linear pair of angles. All right, so I'm looking for one pair of opposite rays, so one straight line. All right, I have two to choose from, but again, I'm looking for a pair, which means I'm only looking for two. If I were to use this one right here, I see that split up into 1, 2, 3 angles, and I only want 2. So I'm going to look at this line here, which I see is split up into 1 and angle 4. So those are my two pairs of angles, vertical and linear.